You are listening to The Insider with Brian Lloyd. The opinions expressed are that of the individuals and can sometimes be of an adult nature.
On today's Insider podcast, we're talking to John Carney, director of Once, Zonad, Begin Again, and the latest film is Sing Street.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm right in saying Sing Street, there is a level of truth to it. It is quite autobiographical.
Loosely autobiographical,
Okay.
I should say, very specifically, in case I offend any of my old school friends or family. I was in a band. I did go to I went from a posh school to a slightly rougher school. So there's elements of my own life in it, but sort of as you go along and you develop a project, you kind of, it gathers its own momentum and new characters, and so there's a sort of a loose sort of memoir-like quality to it, I'll say.
I mean, one of the things that I've always kind of found interesting about like autobiographical films like this is that you're essentially exposing yourself, aren't you? I mean, like, you are kind of telling people stuff that like you may have kept to yourself for a great deal of years, and then now you're putting it out there for all to see. I mean,
hopefully you do that with every film that you make, Hopefully, in a sense, every book or poem or song or film, you're getting a piece of the person that you're, because otherwise it's just sort of pure entertainment.
Okay.
So don't you want, when you listen to a song, don't you want to sort of connect with the writer? And
I suppose I do.
So I would say that that everything that I've done has a bit of kind of, even Zonad,
Yeah.
I don't quite know how that reflects on me, but I'm sure there's a bit of the director in all of his or her films.
But in terms of like Sing Street, I mean, it's, you're taking a very specific kind of point in your life. You're talking about, being in a band and so on and so forth. And, is there a risk maybe of like editorializing it or something like that? Or just, I mean, not necessarily in this case, but like, if you are looking back, it's kind of like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we sounded amazing, or if, everyone loved the band, that kind of thing. Like,
no, that's a good point. I think that there's a moment when you're developing a project where you either go, I'm going to try and really stick to the facts here, or I'm just going to, I'm going to sort of take my hand off the wheel and see where this project wants to take me. And for me personally, that decision came, it announced itself very clearly to me, which was like, mainly because of my memory failed me. So I would, for example, there'd be certain things I'd be like, is that how that happened?
Yeah.
And I would go, I actually can't remember how it happened. And in a sense, I don't really care.
So just write like your own version of it.
Once I made that decision, it kind of freed me up as a writer in terms of any autobiographical thing. I didn't need to, and there are certain great writers who are able to recall their past very, very well and make something magical and new out of that. But for me, this was sort of wish fulfillment. It was I got to do many of the things that as a kid in school I didn't get to do. And that's even being in your school that you grew up in with a clapperboard and a whole crew of people, even that's wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
So by the nature of the project, it seemed to me this is one where I get to sort of have a John Hughes moment of running off into the sunset.
And actually on that, I mean, like, it did really have a very kind of John Hughes, almost Robert Zemeckis vibe to it,
right?
Like, that kind of way. I mean, were there specific films that you watched during the production?
No, I didn't. I kind of just absorbed. I just sort of thought about everything that I had absorbed as a kid in the 80s, and I actually wasn't a huge fan of American 80s movies. I was sort of having a little bit of a European love affair.
Oh yeah,
with myself and my idea of who I was. I thought I'd be sort of more like kind of Francois Truffaut. When like
you're that age,
Back to the Future was out, but I remember going to see E.T. with my brother in the Savoy and it being mind blowing. And I remember cycling on my little red bike, which was rubbish and not a BMX, and cycling away from my house the way that kid goes downhill. But I didn't have a hill.
I'm hoping that it would take off.
Yeah, and kind of it did take off in a way, I guess, but purely in my head. So all those films, and I kind of allowed to sort of reappear in my imagination, making this film a little bit. And
one other one I want to ask you about is the clearances for the songs must have cost you a bomb.
It did. There was a lot of greed that you realize when you start asking people. There were a lot of obscure bands that I asked that didn't give me permission or wanted $100,000 or something. So I just anybody that wanted a large amount of money was just it seemed to me that wasn't the spirit of the film. The bands that are in the film, so The Cure, you know, people like Robert Smith, Paul Weller, are people that when we wrote to them saying, look, we're making this film, they were like, we like the idea of the movie. We get what you're doing. We get that you don't have an infinite amount of money.
Sure.
This is normally our price. Here you go.
Have it.
I mean, they didn't give it to us for free, obviously, because it's. But I mean, as far as I know, Robert Smith actually said something quite cool, which is when we talked about a fee, he said, whatever you have, give it to charity, which we did.
Right.
So it was kind of like that spoke to. So then I started to sort of realize, you know, that it was important to get people involved in the film who wanted to be involved in the film. It didn't feel like this was some guy just putting a soundtrack together or trying to beef up his soundtrack but actually these songs are kind of built into the drama of the piece, as they are, like the Duran Duran song and the Cure song. They're actually kind of
moments
built
in the film.
They're moments in the movie, and they couldn't be replaced by anything else.
But actually, on that, I mean, there must have been a few songs that you're just like, right, shit, we can't afford this. Just don't go and write something else.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, there were loads of songs that I realised, shit, I'm never going to get the rights to that. Just give up on it.
Yeah.
Just forget it now before you get too attached to a scene that you'd write about it, you know?
Was it a Phil Collins one? Was it Phil Collins? I feel like there was a bit of bitterness. Because I love Phil Collins, and I was really annoyed when it was like, no man can love Phil Collins.
You didn't laugh at that joke?
I did not laugh at that, and I have a bone to pick with. Okay,
play.
what's your beef with Phil Collins?
My beef with Phil Collins is a similar beef that I have to people like Eric Clapton.
Okay.
You know, I get that there's talent.
Sure.
I can see that there's proficiency.
Yeah.
I just don't buy it. I just don't believe it. I've never believed Phil Collins. I've never believed Eric Clapton. I know that there's technical excellence there.
Yeah.
For sure, Phil Collins is a great drummer.
Yeah.
He could definitely write a song. He knew about structure. He knew about homage. To me, it's just they're hideous little earworms that I can't get out of my.
I mean, is it you don't feel there's any soul to them? Is that it?
Yeah.
It's like No Jacket Required is like that's the most soulful album.
And I know, and loads of musicians. I mean, the two Ken and Carl who worked in the soundtrack of my film were like, dude, you have to get into. And these are brilliant musicians that I respect. And I'd go home and I'd put on a Phil Collins record, and it would just
nothing.
I think maybe it's something that you get into at a certain age. Like I do with Steely Dan. I try to give Steely Dan records to people now.
Yeah.
And if they didn't get into Steely Dan, by the time you're 12, for some reason people have a hard time. They think it's cheesy, or they think the music's too anal, or it's too, jazzy or whatever. So to me, it's like, it's a mental block. You're just not going to get it. It's fine. It's not a person. So I think with the Phil Collins thing, it's just something that I objected to when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. And it's held over.
And it's just, I can't go there. I can't get into that. It's a terrifying place for me, the world of Phil Collins.
It's not that terrifying. He's okay. We'll move on. Talk to me about casting, because I mean it was a really well casted film.
Yeah.
I mean, how many sessions did you go through? Like,
I went through 2 or 3 really big, sort of like national casting days where we opened up offices to any kid that had a guitar or a piano or ever played anything. Come in, tell us a story, play a song, and from that I started to put together the shape of this sort of band and pick the various different characters and said, well, you're not the lead guy, but maybe you'd be a really funny drummer or bass player. And I like the look of these. When I put the band together, I kind of, it was like moving around, until you get the right sort of image for a band. And Ferdy was one of the first kids in the room, and then we went off and searched the whole country and came back to the very first guy who walked into the room, which is often what happens. Yeah, it's in the first day, but you want to exhaust the search fully, but you actually come back to your first choice. And
I mean, did you have to do a lot of work with them in terms of like the kind of music that they liked or the kind of music that they played, or was it a case of they kind of got it straight away and they knew what it was about?
No, we did a lot of work, a lot of research, and I introduced them to a lot of bands that they didn't know from the 80s, and they obviously knew the big bands from the 80s, but there's a lot of more obscure stuff and it was a lot of fun showing these young kids this stuff like Japan or more obscure English and American acts. That I would play them for specific lyrical references or so it was quite good fun, sort of opening up areas of the 80s that these kids thought they knew everything about the 80s because they've seen The Breakfast Club or they know such and such a band or The Cure or whatever, but actually it was such an incredible decade for pop music. It's kind of, you never get to the bottom of it.
No, not at all. But I mean, it's one of those things like, you should never work with animals or children. I mean, was it tough directing children? I mean, was it tough kind of on set or?
No, it's just a slightly different. It's just a kind of a slightly different approach to working with. I mean, there were real, obviously there's professional actors in the film as well, with Jack and Maria and Aidan and various people along the way. It was I like mixing it up. I've always worked with non-actors. Glenn was a non-actor. Marquetta was a non-actor. There's people in Zonad who weren't actors. There's people in Bachelor's Walk who weren't actors. It's nice to mix it up because you get this sort of nice sense of energy in a scene where you kind of know there's something about that scene that's slightly different. The way great 70s movies, the director would just like his driver for 40 days. I kind of like this, put him in the film. And you can tell there's something off and interesting about it. I quite just like that as a filmmaker.
Yeah. But, I mean, in terms of, actually setting it in the 80s, I mean, the period detail and all that sort of thing, like, I mean, in a weird, as I was watching it, it kind of reminded me, and I, in terms of how the detail looked, like LA Confidential. Is in that, like, you knew it was set in the 80s, but it was all in the background, and that made it a bit more kind of authentic. As in, that kind of, as in, like, they weren't like picking up Rubik's cubes and playing.
No, I hate that sort of stuff.
Yeah. But that was a conscious decision.
That was a conscious decision from the beginning. Was that I'm never going to try to have a big wide establishing shot of Dublin. I'm not going to get too into the details because it's too easy. And, and I'm not going to have a montage of Thatcher and Charlie Haughey and all the, it dominates the film, and it makes, I think in a way it makes the film harder to relate to, and it's harder for kids nowadays to feel sympathy with the characters if the dating of it is too specific. Also, in 100 years' time, nobody's going to tell the difference between the 1980s and 2015. Nobody's going to care. Tell
me, I mean, and again, I don't want to get too kind of personal on this, but I understand. Like, I know we mentioned at the start that there was a certain level of autobiography with it. Your brother is named Jim, and that was the boat.
Yeah. Well, to me, the film and the dedication to the end about brothers is more about the idea of this sort of, in life, those sort of uncular characters or big brothers. They're not quite parents. They're blood relatives and they're connected to you, but they just sort of give you permission in the way that your parents just can't quite do. Because parents are your parents and they have to, but there's these characters that I found in my life, siblings, certain characters in school, even a teacher occasionally now and then, who just gives you this little wink or this nod, so you're doing all right, gives you permission to just to like even to put on a jacket that your parents wouldn't let you wear, or the extreme versions are like to dye your hair, get your ears pierced, do something that played the guitar, and not be the people who put a green light as opposed to a red light in your life are, in a sense, I mean, your parents are the most valuable people in your life, but there's these other characters that come in that are kind of almost more significant in terms of development, in terms of giving you, which is a real thing in Ireland, particularly in the 80s, where if you were gay, it was a hard time. If you were different, if you were into this type of music, you were beaten up by those guys. It was like, enough with that crazy. And we thankfully are moving towards a more tolerant, forgiving society. But back then,
it was rough.
But the people that you met that didn't judge you on that were kind of like, oh my God, they were everything.
Life.
They're hugely important. So that's what the film is about for me: is being given your head and let go off, and you don't just have to be a student in this school. Like, that's a very important message, I think.
There's early talk of Oscars,
right? I
mean, has there been discussions on that? Do you care?
Well, of course I care. I mean, in that
Wouldn't it be nice?
They're the kind of the in a sense for America, that's the sort of the benchmark. That's the place that this is our party. This is our night where we get to give out these gongs and say who's better than the other person. And it's ridiculous in one hand, of course, but so I do care. And it was very good fun having Once win one, and it was very good fun having Begin Again nominated for one. It's hilarious, and it's kind of wrong and ridiculous in one sense, and so if it happens, it'd be hilarious. I don't think I'd go again because I've been to the Oscars, and it's kind of,
it's exhausting.
You want to go once in your life if you're a filmmaker. It's a lot of fun, but it's not something that I'm interested in anymore. For various reasons, the chief one being that it can get very Moorish. You know, it can get once you've been there once, you think with the next film, oh God, could I? Even with Begin Again, it was like, could we get this song nominated? Or I don't care about any. You can't care when you're making a film about any of that stuff. So it's funny but I mean, it's a waste of ink. Those people writing about Oscars in January.
Oh yeah,
there's like how many countless brilliant films have yet to come out with great songs in them, or But if somebody wants to write a funny piece about tick for an Oscar, good, they're fine. It's fun. It's fun to be involved in that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, because we look at Room, we look at Brooklyn, and all these kind of things, and like it's the Irish Renaissance and all that sort of thing. But like you had one, Scott, like however long ago it was, like
back at the Oscars. Yeah,
this is it. Like,
old hat to me.
Yeah, it's old hat to you. Like, I mean, how do you view, like Lenny and John Crowley and all that? Yeah,
I got an email from somebody returning to John Crowley instead of John Carney. So they obviously gone John C in there, and it had Crowley because we were both in their inbox. So I know all about John Crowley.
We had him on before.
And who he's meeting that day.
Oh, really?
I think it's great for anything that, facilitates other filmmakers to have a shot. Anything that, I'd be wary of the Irish Renaissance idea that we read a lot about, because actors that I know are still not working and are still the poorest. It's one of the lowest paid jobs in Ireland right
absolutely,
now.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be the case. Irish actors should be working. They should be employed, and they should be in plays and theatre and films and TV and that whole thing. It's just not happening. So when that happens, I'll happily say there's an Irish Renaissance of movies. But at the moment, personally speaking, for both those guys, it's great to go to LA and to put on a tuxedo and swan around. It's hilarious and it's great fun, and I hope they're not taking it too seriously either.
Yeah, but in terms of like Irish films, I mean, there is something about it that they all seem to be very, like, sure enough, they're made by Irish writers and Irish directors and Irish actors, but it always just seems very much about Ireland, that kind of way. As in, like, Brooklyn was all about, being in Ireland and being an American. Sing Street is about Ireland in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, do you ever think we'll move on from that? And I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm just saying, do you think we'll move on from that?
I think we will. I mean, I think that's where kind of greatness lies. It's where you can separate. Here's what it is, in a sense. It's like, the more specific a film is, or a book or a poem, to the person who's creating it, the better it is for me. The broader the story needs to get, the less interesting it becomes. So in order for a movie to succeed, because films are becoming harder and harder to sell and market and make now, the stories are becoming broader and broader and broader, because they're reaching for this big universal appeal. Yeah. And that's okay for me, because I'm making entertaining, funny musicals, so I'm not too worried about it. But for the real artistic cinema, I think the more specific films are about the voices of the people creating them, the better and the more interesting and important the films are to me. So that really, your question really chimes in with something that I'm thinking of constantly, is when am I going to be able to shake off this island thing that we have? And it seems to be everybody has to get on a boat or a plane at the end of every Irish movie. And I hope that day will pass, and we'll just be able to tell stories about human characters in the. But for me, Ireland, it's just a fact. It's enormously significant to who I am. Is the island mentality, where we are in relation to England. We are this weird little island floating around in the Atlantic Ocean. We have no business having these phenomenal bands, phenomenal poets, phenomenal playwrights traveling all around the world. Like I got on a plane the other day, Van Morrison, got into the taxi, U2, got to the restaurant, the Cranberries, got to the thing, Hosier, got to the thing, Glenn. It's like no other country of 4.5 million people can say that. It is kind of amazing. It is. And we have this confidence, but also it can, as you say, become a little bit like
parochial almost.
Well, not so much parochial, but more sort of island based. But it's to me it's understandable, because we are geographically in this funny little place, and our connections with England to me are very interesting, and I kind of try and do a little bit about that in Sing Street. To when we were young, London was like,
it was just a place.
It was just
Mecca.
like, and it was just there. And now London is like, you're there, and I could be there by the time we finish the interview.
Easily,
it's like. But then it was like, you got the boat and you got the train and you got to England. It was full of colour and it was exotic and it was sexy and it was dangerous, and you had Thatcher, but you had punk and you had the Jam. And it was I mean, it was an amazing journey to sort of go on, you know. So, but I think that as Irish cinema progresses, and you know, I was looking at Tom Hall's film recently. We watched it the other night, Sensation, which is a great film, which is a film that tells a very specific story about a very specific character, and its Irishness is sort of irrelevant. It's just as good as any European film, and it's and I think there'll be. You know, there's a lot of interesting TV. I hope Bachelor's Walk wasn't diddly-eye, which we made a few years ago. I hope that those stories are sort of, you know, can chime in with any 30-year-old in any city going through love and loss and grief and, you know, life and death and love and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'll just get that.
Yeah, do you want to run it? No, but I mean, you know, when you're making a film like Sing Street, and again, this kind of ties in with what we were talking about, does it weigh on your mind if this is going to travel? What I mean by that is that, like, obviously something like Sing Street, it's the kind of film that, like, anyone who lived in Ireland in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, was in a band in Ireland, would be like, shit, this is my life. I've seen this all. Like, I was watching it. I was like, I was in a band in school. We had those exact same conversations, all that kind of thing. But I would think, like, an American audience, let's say, or maybe, I don't know, a German audience would watch it and be like, well, I don't really get that joke, and I don't really get this joke. I mean, do you kind of, like, second guess yourself, or is it a case of just fucking commit to it and do it?
Yeah, there's a bit of both. There's a bit of, on one hand, just going for it and telling your story and trusting that people will just, because you like it, other people will like it. But then there is a slight, you'd be foolish to work completely in a bubble, right? I mean, we all read, you know, the New York Times, or we read The Guardian, and we read big papers from around the world. We follow, you know, the world is shrinking, and we know that, all that. So you're aware every time you turn a camera on, you're not just making films here in Ireland on your own with your friends. You know that if you put that online,
it'll be everywhere.
It can be, at least even in theory. You put something on YouTube, it goes. In my day, I'd make a sketch with my mate. We'd go to Wicklow and we'd watch it in my drawing room,
and that'd be
with 8 of my friends, and that's its audience. And it never gets seen beyond my house. You know what I mean? And the idea of dropping a video, I remember with November, after doing the first film we made, giving that to RTE. And RTE, we did a deal, and they'd play it, and it was going on TV. People are going to see that stuff that we made with that camcorder the other day. That was phenomenal to me. But nowadays, of course, I'm thinking about, well, how is this going to play here? Or Begin Again did incredibly well in
Japan, I believe.
No, in South Korea.
Oh, South Korea.
I've never been. I don't know any Korean people, I think. I have no idea. I never thought for a second. I never planned it. I never thought it. I could have never second guessed it. For some reason, it takes off there. But, so in a sense, I'm saying, you know, go with your instincts. But I think it's important as a filmmaker to be open to this idea that this film is going to land in different territories, and I should try, you know, I don't want to make, you know, something that's so specifically unique to Ireland, 1984, kid in a band, that nobody gets. Like Adam Levine, who's become a mate of mine since Begin Again. I showed him the film the other day. He actually sings a bit in the film now, and he was like,
in Sing Street?
Yeah, there's a little bit that he sings. He was like, that's the story of my life in a band. And I was like, really? And he said, totally. That was Southern California in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm telling you, you told my story, and you told every other kid. And I was like, that's a good sign to hear that coming from somebody who's not in Ireland or England, you know, who the film was kind of made for more.
Do you see yourself making a sequel? I mean,
to this?
Jeez,
I can't imagine it. But I mean, we've joked about it, but as you do about any film you make, you just joke about it. Yeah, maybe
it'd be an interesting story. Like, I'd like to see where he goes after, you know, that kind of way.
There is something to be said about the idea that when a film ends, that's it, it's over. And that's what makes something kind of magical in a way, is that there is no more. Whereas nowadays, like, even there's more of everything now. Like
true enough,
DVD extras, or you watch a TV show and there's the making of, and you kind of sometimes there's something nice that the idea of, like, Casablanca as a movie, that's it. Everything else is lost. Do you know what I mean? You just get the film. There's no extras, there's no interviews, you can't even get any extra press about Casablanca. It's just all lost. That's a beautiful thing. You just get the thing. That appeals to me.
That's interesting.
But if somebody gives me $1 million, I'll go and do it.
You'll go, no problem,
sure, That theory will go out the window immediately.
I mean, do you see yourself continuing on in purely movies. I mean, would you see yourself moving into TV kind of thing, like miniseries?
Yeah, I'm actually, I have a TV show in development at the moment. Very early stages of development, which is a thing set in New York, loosely in the music world, about a guy who has a kind of a mental breakdown, and goes back to his first love, which is music, set in America, set in New York, and branches out to other states. And
is it like Begin Again? Like, is it like a TV version of Begin Again?
It's almost like, you know, the way there's a sort of a thing now where people are going back to their library of like films to see if there's ideas in those films. So the Fargo, Psycho became a TV show. I mean, we could go on naming them all day, and like, there's so many of them. Or plays, musical comedies now based on, or musical shows based on. So in that sense, there were things in Begin Again. I developed that project for so long. There's so much stuff I threw out along the way in honing it down to an hour and a half script.
Yeah.
And I threw out some great stuff, and I threw out some great characters because I had to get on with it.
Of course.
And I've often thought there's a story, there's a kind of a movie. Now, I wouldn't call it Begin Again, or I wouldn't cast Ruffalo in it. I don't think he'd do it. But anyway, but I think there's something in that character that I like that I think didn't fully. I personally haven't gotten off my chest yet. In the way that sometimes with a film you're done.
Yeah.
Like Sing Street. That's it. It's
gone. Out of you.
I have nothing more to say about that. And with Begin Again, it was like, there was this slight niggling feeling, and some journalists didn't like it. It didn't quite kick off in the press the way I wanted it to. So I feel like there's a little bit of unfinished business there that I could maybe explore again.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see? Is it the sort of thing that like you could have turned that into a second film of Begin Again, or is it a case of no, I want this to be just purely television? I mean, do you?
Yeah, I like.
Do you differentiate between them?
I liked making television before when I did it, and the three of us had 3 of the best years of our lives. We met all of our girlfriends and mates, and still stay in contact with everybody. And TV was very rewarding in the sense that you had an idea, you pitch it to the co-writers, put it down. Next week it's on TV. Next week you're in a taxi and the taxi driver's talking about that scene. And it was so immediate. It was almost
quickness.
Like just that speed of reaction. It was like, I don't know what it was like. It was a cross between like writing your diary and being a school kid where you'd go in with your essay and get marked immediately. Whereas with films, you get your marks like 3 years later and you're kind of done, and somebody then writes about it. It's like 2 years after I started this, I'm getting a response, and I'm learning about my art or my craft way too late. TV, I learned more, and learned so much more making bachelor's work than I did any film. And I think in a sense Once is sort of a testament to that, because it's the next thing I made after bachelor's work, with all the learning that I had made and all of the audience reaction that you get from making a TV show distilled in this little film. So I love that, and I'd love to return to that. And it's also the idea of, if you come up with a TV show that did last, that's the next 5 or 6 years of your life. You're doing that every year. You're sorted. You know what you're doing. You know what you're working at. Yeah.
I mean, working on a TV show like that, that's something that you are just like constantly repetitive. I mean, does it not become boring? Does it not become a little bit kind of like creatively stifling in a way?
On a TV show?
On a TV show, yeah.
I think if you pick something that you love and that you're interested in and that you can talk about, then I think it probably doesn't. So there's certain shows, like I can't imagine Matthew Weiner, who did Mad Men, ever getting too bored of talking about it, because he seems obsessed by it. Or David Chase on The Sopranos. So I think it's very important, and people, you'd be lucky if you came up with a project that you were just happy to keep going back to.
Yeah, that would hold your attention.
That would hold your attention as a creative force as well, and so I think this is something that appeals to me, the idea of music serving this really fundamental purpose in life as a thing that's more than just entertainment, but is actually, I'm a firm believer in the idea that art has incredible purpose and not just something to look at on a wall or to read, but actually kind of keeps you going. And keeps you sort of sustained.
Have you watched Vinyl?
I watched the first episode of Vinyl.
What did you think?
I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't a fan.
It's just interesting. It's just the two kind of.
Yeah, I found it kind of very black and white in terms of character and the message of the show. I found it very sort of like, it was a show very much about itself and very much about a little bit too much about the good and the bad people in the
Yeah.
film and in the music industry, and I think there's a lot more gray areas. Like the music industry is very interesting in terms of the weird parallel between business, like commerce and art.
Yeah.
Like film and music go together in that sense. That the only two industries. I mean, I don't know. I suppose the art world. I mean, at least in the art world, you have your dealer and you have your gallery and you have all your, But you go and you close the door and you're just on your own with your paints and your brushes and your world, and you're on your own. In film and TV, you're constant, and music.
You're constantly being critiqued, and there's 10
you're-
people standing
Yeah,
around
but you're
you.
never on your own.
Yeah.
You're rarely on your own, and you're always being asked, how does this relate? How do we get our money back? That's always and it's weird as an artist being, because you don't begin as a filmmaker thinking of anything other than as a great artist. I'm a great artist. I'll tell these great stories. And finally you have to realize, oh my God, it's just not just about that.
Yeah.
It's really about paying back loans.
Yeah.
Can I pay back this phenomenal loan that these people have given me? And if I don't pay it back, I don't get to go again.
Yeah.
So it's very important to make films that make some money. And that's the weird sort of, and in the music industry, it's the same thing. It's this really interesting mix between these A&R men who, in one sense, are evil. I mean, they really are dark, with these artists who are kids and they're so young much of the time. It's it's an endlessly fascinating world to me, I think, But the vinyl thing, I think, was a bit too...
It was a bit too black and white, wasn't it?
A bit too like Empire or something like that, And also, like, how many times do we need to know that the 70s were crazy? Yeah, they took a lot of drugs, they got naked, they went to parties. We know. We don't need a 10-minute tracking shot like Goodfellas to tell us that.
I was going to say, Boogie Nights kind of just drew a line under the 70s for me. Like, that's it, I get it. It was all crazy in the 70s.
Yeah.
That's
But also
it.
the great thing about Boogie Nights is that Boogie Nights is so human, and each of its characters are
really realised.
really beautifully realized, and everybody is given weight, and everybody is given depth, and everybody is given some humanity, which I loved about that film. And I think it's such a hard thing to make a film, and it's particularly an ensemble cast with 10 pretty significant characters, each feeling that their name is real. It felt like he had created
Just this world.
amazing world with all those characers, And vinyl just didn't. It didn't. Maybe in series 2 it'll pick up.
Have you seen the full series? Yeah.
No, I only saw
Oh, it's your first episode you were saying.
I only saw the. But also I'm bitter because I was going to direct an episode and I didn't get the gigs.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay, on that bombshell.
Unbelievable, eh?
On that bombshell, we'll leave it there. John Carney, thanks a mil.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.